Okay, so let's begin. Great. So I've entitled this lecture "The Power of the Heart." Okay, and this is a continuation of the previous lesson that we discussed last week, in which the sort of the main concept of that lesson was that we as human beings have three brains. Okay, and society and modern culture usually tells us that there's only one brain, right? The intellectual brain. But when we really begin to study the human body and the soul, we really begin to see that we are sort of there is a law of the law of three that governs us, or that we use, okay, to manifest ourselves, to express ourselves. Okay, and so next one, here we go.
You made these slides?
Yeah. Okay, so just a brief sort of talk about the last week's class, right, which was called the three brains. Okay, and so like I said, we say in the Gnostic tradition that the human being has three brains. Okay, the first one, which is the most common one, the one that most of us are familiar with, which is referred to as the intellectual brain. Okay, and the physical organ of that brain is, of that brain is the physical brain. Okay, and it is the center of thought. Okay, and then we have what's called the emotional brain. Okay, and then what's called the motor, instinctive, and sexual brain, or the motor brain. Okay, and these three brains work together, right? Thought, emotion, action. Okay, every action is triggered by an emotion. Every emotion is triggered by an action, by a thought. Okay, and in the last class we also discussed that these three brains influence each other, right? We now know, for instance, that the state of the physical body can affect your emotional state and your thoughts, right? And the idea of the teachings is to help us balance these three brains. Okay, the idea of the teachings is to help us integrate these three brains in a way that allows us to objectively perceive reality. Okay. Obviously, there was a lot more to that, but I'm gonna move ahead. Okay, and so one of the things that I want to mention before we go into today's topic, and the reason why I'm actually giving this lecture, is because if we pay attention to the system that we have created, all of our education is sort of aimed at the intellectual center, right? Most of all the way that society teaches us is by using the intellectual brain. Okay, very little attention is actually placed on our emotional aspect, right? And we sort of live in a society that's full of sort of governed by intellectuals and instinctual people. Okay, and so we have educate or let's say that our education system has mainly focused on these two aspects, the intellectual and the emotion, right? A lot of emphasis is placed on knowledge and intellectual information and on action, right? And the health of the physical body and sports and all of that, right? But again, very little attention is placed on emotions. Even in the fields of psychology, they focus so much on the mind, okay, that they really forgot one of the primordial tenets of all the spiritual and esoteric traditions, and that is that the brain, okay, is actually not the center of command, but the center, or the brain within the human machine that sends messages to the physical body, but the messages that are sent to the brain come from our heart. They come from our soul. Okay, so and I'm gonna show some slides now. I'm gonna get a little bit into some science, what the new research has found. But the common, again, the sort of the common theme, or the idea is that we think that the brain is one, it's like the executive branch and the one that executes and commands everything. But the new science is actually showing us that it's quite different. That the more that we actually study the heart, we see that the heart seems to be more in command of the entire human machine. Okay, so let's get right into it. So I found some very interesting things. First, I found these slides from, there's a little video on YouTube that you can find from the Institute of Heart Math. Okay, you can find it. You can follow them on Instagram or go to their website. They're a research company that basically started doing a lot of research into the heart and emotions. All right, and so they made this little video and put a few slides, and I'm going to use that today because very interesting things. So the first thing is that in fetal development, the heart forms and starts beating before the brain is developed. Okay, so the first organ that starts in the human machine is the heart. Okay, so right away, that should make us think about something. All right, this is a very important organ. Perhaps the most important organ because it's the first one to actually develop, right? And so right then, you can begin to sort of see why I was saying that it is really the heart, which is in occult astrology would be the central sun of our solar system, okay? And it is that center of gravity or that world, that intelligence that really governs the rest of the physical body or sends messages to the rest of the physical body, okay? Okay, and so this is why we're here to study today. So some of the powers of the heart, and funny because when I made this slide, I completely forgot about love. So I had to remake that because I showed her the slide like at, I don't know, 11 this morning or something. But anyway, so the powers of the heart, okay, intuition. What is intuition? I heard this way of explaining intuition from a scientist called super learning, and I really love those two words together because that really is what intuition is. Okay, intuition is the ability to understand something immediately, okay, without the need for intellectual reasoning. So intuition is an experience of the truth, okay, that bypasses all intellectual reasoning, okay? And this always reminds me of the Matrix. He wants to know something, you plug it in, and it's like the download of information, right? You want to share something?
I heard someone say Gnostic Aeon, right? It's intuition is like the sixth sense.
Yes. Yes.
We have five senses, but they forget about the sixth sense, which is intuition.
Right.
That's something that's embedded within us from before.
Right. And so intuition basically is that power of the heart, or that, and when I say power, really, it's just a natural quality, okay, of the awakened consciousness, of the essence, of the soul. Okay, and so intuition is basically that bridge that connects us physically to the transcendental, to the source of knowledge. In the same way that you're here now, you're using your five senses to connect with the truth that I'm speaking to you. There is intuition is sort of the soul's ability to tap into the inner wisdom. Right? And so I'm sure we've all had this, and the reason why we're not highly intuitive people right now is because our mind usually shuts down our intuition by reasoning, okay? But anyway, let's move forward, right? So that's one of the main powers of the heart. Also, the heart is the center that allows us to bond with our environment and to bond with others. All right, so it's that chakra, that ability of the soul that allows us to establish deep, loving connections with everyone. Okay, so the essence of the heart is love, right? That is the superior emotion, the emotion that the heart allows us to experience. Okay. The heart is also related to emotional intelligence, and even emotional intelligence and a higher IQ and obviously happiness, okay? And I'm going to talk about what emotional intelligence is, because I think everyone is usually familiar with the term IQ, but hardly everyone knows this concept of emotional intelligence, which is relatively a new term. It's only really been like used in the past 10, 20 years, okay? Especially in the past 15 years, it's been sort of more, you hear more of it, okay? So the heart is that, or emotional intelligence and happiness emanates from the heart, okay? The heart is also related with granting us creative imagination, because as we will explore today, the state of your heart will influence the state of your mind, right? And so they have found that when we have so-called positive emotions, okay, like love, love, joy, bliss, when we are in those emotional states, our brain is actually begins to work in a more creative way, okay? And we'll get a little bit into the science of that. The heart, esoterically speaking, also gives us the power to remember our previous lives, okay? And also the ability to unfold in the astral and have lucid dreams, and all of those different aspects, which are very interesting, because the mystic and the esoteric always practices the science of astral unfolding, because it is our ability basically to consciously, as souls, step out of this physical body for whatever amount of time that we can do that for, and go out and investigate the deep realities of the universe while our body rests, right? And there are other, if you've ever heard of remote viewing, of people that have the ability, for instance, to travel to other places and see what's happening in those places at the same time, okay? And the CIA actually did some interesting studies with this. As you know, there's actually like a movie that sort of like mocks this ability, which is the Man That Stare at Goats. You ever seen that movie? It's like George Clooney, I think it is.
I never saw it.
Okay. I actually never saw the movie. I saw the trailer, but I'm like, I know what they're talking about. It's basically like people that have the ability to see, to basically project their consciousness to other places and see what's happening there. And like they serve as spies for the government and stuff like that. But anyway, before you found out about it, the government found out about it. And they've done extensive tests on everything that you know, right? Okay, so let's continue with these slides. Did you know the heart is an intelligent electromagnetic field generator that thinks? Okay, this is something interesting, that we never associate the heart with thinking, okay, or the heart with memories, okay? But science now has shown us, and this slide you can't really read too clearly, but I'll read it to you. And I'll make these slides available to you in case you want to, go through them and stuff. The heart has a series of neurons that have both short and long-term memory, and their signals sent to the brain can affect our emotional experiences. So they actually found out that in the heart we have something called sensory neurites, okay, which are basically neurons. Okay, same way that we have neurons in the brain, we also have neurons in the heart. Okay, and we have over 40,000 of them in the heart. Okay. And we also have those same sensory neurites in the gut, in the stomach. And this is why there's this other sort of, this other field in science that's studying the solar plexus in the stomach as this, they're calling it the second brain, right? In Gnosis, we call it that's all part of the emotional brain, right? And the heart is the center of the superior emotions, and the solar plexus is the center of what we call the inferior emotions, right? And it's also related to not only inferior emotions, but it's also related to telepathy. Okay, so the heart is intuition, and the solar plexus is related to telepathy. Okay, and so before we move further, let me see what the next slide is. Yeah, so before we move forward, I want to tell you a very interesting story. Okay, this is you can see many of these stories happening of people that have had heart transplants. Okay, and there was this really wild story that I came across not long ago, that of this little girl who was 10 and received a heart transplant or a heart from an 8-year-old girl, okay, or vice versa. It's one of the two. And turns out, the surgery goes well. After the heart transplant, the girl begins to have nightmares about this guy that was chasing her in the woods, okay? And the guy would approach her, look at her, tell her something, and then abused her and then killed her, okay? So it was a pretty horrible nightmare. So they take her to the psychologist. The psychologist says, that sounds more like a memory, And so then they started investigating. They brought a forensics sketch artist, right? The guy draws the guy, and then they put out a warrant for the guy. And it turns out in this village that they found this person, and it turns out that when they brought him into custody, he actually confessed to the murder of the little girl that gave the heart to this other new person, right? And the interesting part is that when the cops were interviewing him, he actually told them the exact same things that this person in the girl's nightmares was telling her, right? Pretty wild stuff. There was another one of a woman that got a heart transplant, and all of a sudden, as soon as she started recovering in the hospital, she started craving KFC food. Okay, and they actually found out that the guy that had donated the heart to her loved KFC and used to eat KFC. So very interesting, creepy things, right? And so obviously from an esoteric perspective, this is nothing new to us because we know that the heart is really where we have all of our memories. So think back to the beginning of this lecture, and we said that the heart is the first organ that develops, right? And it's almost as if when you come into this world, as soon as the heart is there, your soul is linked to that process. And you're already establishing and bringing back all of the memories from your previous lives, okay? Which we'll talk about later as well, right? And again, this is why in all spiritual traditions, all spiritual traditions, this is the heart and life is so precious, right? That within the heart is sort of the door to all of our to life and the door to all of our memories, right? That's why all of the different spiritual masters sort of tell you to go to focus on the heart, okay? Okay, so now that I got your attention, did you know the heart sends more information to the brain than vice versa? Okay, so these are scientific studies that have found that the heart actually is sending more information to the brain than the brain is sending to the heart, okay? Which again sort of leads us to conclude that the one really in charge is the heart, okay? Even though we're always sort of trying to suppress our emotions and suppress our intuition, right? And listen to the voice of intuition, but rather to listen to the voice of this confused brain that we have up here, right? Okay, and the heart also has an electromagnetic field that can change according to your emotions, okay? In last class, we talked about something called mental hygiene, and we should practice mental hygiene, okay? And this is the reason why all spiritual traditions are always getting into our business and telling us how to feel, how to act, and how to think, because it turns out that everything that you're feeling, everything that you're thinking, is not only within your body, but that you actually emanate that towards others, right? And so, like in the MTA, courtesy is contagious. I love that thing I always see there. Huh? Kindness? Kindness is contagious, yeah. And so, right, you ever walked into a room, really bad energy, all of a sudden you start to feel, heavy, negative, and you even begin to feel, or you even begin to experience thoughts that you never experienced, things that you never even think about, and all of a sudden you're thinking about these things. You're like, where are these thoughts coming from, right? Well, news is they might actually not be your thoughts. They might be thoughts from another person that's contaminating your That's contaminating you, your psyche, right? You wanted to share something? No? Okay. Okay. And so in this research, they found out that this actually, the magnetic field of the heart can be measured up to several feet away from the body. Okay, and from what I remember, the research showed that this magnetic field expands at least like 5 feet from the body, but they imagined that it extends even farther than that, but they were only able to measure up to 5 or 7 feet of the magnetic field. Okay, so again, that's very interesting. Right? Okay. Did you know that positive emotions create physiological benefits in your body? Okay, this is something that we sort of explored a little bit, but obviously there is a lot of research now.
Please tell me again.
And when I actually talk to it, it never like responds. So they actually found, obviously, that negative emotions or emotions in general have a physical effect in your body, right? Negative emotions create illnesses, and I'll say positive emotions, higher emotions, actually promote well-being and higher levels of immunity and so forth. Okay, some of these things I think I talked about when I talked about the science of meditation, which is also a video that you can find on the YouTube channel. Okay? And yeah, this is related to that. So did you know that you can boost your immune system by conjuring positive emotions? Okay, so again, if you're a person that is always in fear, a person that's always angry, a person that's always stressed out, then your body is going to react in a negative way to that, right? And it all starts, you know, we can say that it all starts from the brain or with the mind, because we are telling the body what to do, but really it all starts with the heart, because your heart is you. Your heart is the way that you actually begin to feel, right? Life, the way that you take in life, okay? Impressions come in through the 5 senses, and then they go into the heart, and then the heart sends an emotion to the brain, and then the brain tries to interpret what's happening, okay? And depending on how we have been raised, if we were raised in a chaotic, unsafe environment, then we grow up, right, feeling that life is a scary place, and that we should always be sort of in this fight or flight state that puts the body into stress, right? Okay, and this is what this slide is saying, that negative emotions can create nervous system chaos, but positive emotions do the opposite of that. Okay, and this is why in the practice of meditation, one of the practices that come from the Buddhist tradition is a practice that we'll do today. It's called the meditating on the 4 limitless thoughts. Okay, and or in Buddhism, they're always meditating on compassion, right? To try to embody compassion, to try to feel compassion, right? And it turns out that obviously when you're feeling these emotions, when you feel emotions of love, compassion, you are actually, your entire system becomes balanced and becomes harmonious, okay? Okay, and then now the other part is how the emotions begin to influence our brain, okay? And it says that positive emotions help the brain in creativity and innovative problem solving, which is something that we talked about last week, because the complete title of last class was The 3 Brains and How to Solve Problems. And in that class, Samuel Viora gives a wonderful teaching. He says, if you want to solve all of your problems, what you need to do is to shut your mind and allow the heart to give you the answer to the problem. Because the things that we call problems are just mental states that don't have access to an answer that we need. But the mind is not the one that's going to give us the answer. It's the heart, the one that's going to give us the access to that wisdom, right? To that truth. And so positive emotions can increase the brain's ability to make good decisions and creativity. So let's get into this very interesting study. They did some EEG scans on different groups of people, okay, and specifically monks. Okay, they took monks that had over 10,000 hours of meditation experience, and they started doing brain scans to see what was happening in their brain while they were in these deep states of meditation. Okay, and so what they found was that when we are in a deep state of meditation, the brain begins to vibrate or sense what they call gamma brainwaves. Okay, and those are waves related to brain activity, which is greater for learning. Okay, basically, in this state, when your brain is vibrating at this rate, your brain is sort of working at its max. It's using all of its ability. It's able to receive, to process a lot of information. Okay, and now if we compare these states to a normal states, for instance, when we are in our busily engaged in our activities and conversations, when we're in what we call the visual state or the wakeful state, the state that we're in, our brain is emanating beta waves, which are they range from 13 to 30 cycles per second. Okay, that's when we are awake. Now look at the big difference. It's almost double that. When we are in a deep state of meditation, that we're apparently, this is the perspective that outsiders have for meditation, that apparently a person is like not engaged in the world. It's inside of his own mind, let's say. The brain is actually working even more than when we are in a normal state of wakefulness. Okay, so it's very interesting. So when we are functioning from that state, we have a higher ability, okay, to process information, and we have a higher creative potential, and so forth. Okay. The other brainwaves are related. The delta waves are when we are deep sleep and we're not dreaming. The next one is when we are drowsy and drifting into the sleepy state. Okay. And the alpha waves are related when we are starting to go deep into meditation. Okay. Okay. And this also, so gamma brainwaves are involved in higher mental activity and consolidation of information. Okay, operating from this frequency allows our brain to link and process information from multiple parts of the brain. Okay, and so those gamma brainwaves or those states are not only accessible to us when we are in a deep state of meditation, but also when we begin to master the practice of meditation, and we begin to really practice what we call mindfulness or self-remembering. Okay, so you can access those states at any given moment. Okay, also positive emotions and something called gray matter. Okay, they found out that positive emotions and meditation increase something called gray matter in the brain. Okay, and the gray matter includes regions of the brain involved in muscle control, sensory perception such as seeing and hearing, memory, emotion, speech, decision-making, and self-control. Okay, that's interesting, because that's why they've found out, for instance, that they've done studies on people that had addictions, for instance, alcoholics, and when they go to the Alcoholic Anonymous, they separated people into groups. Some that they taught techniques of meditation where they would meditate something like 8 minutes a day. Okay, and then another group that just didn't. And they found out that out of those group within a period of 2 years, the people that didn't actually learn to meditate had a 20% or 30% chance of going back to the addiction, as opposed to only 8% or 8 or 7% or something of the ones that actually went through the meditation program, right? But it's very interesting, right? And it makes sense here that the more gray matter we have, the more we meditate, the more gray matter, the more self-control that we have, right? And we make better decisions, and we even have better sensory perceptions, okay? So again, it's all linked to sort of creativity. Okay? And now I found this interesting statement by this writer, Pao Chang, and he made this very, very wonderful summary of the characteristics of the brain and the heart, and why we should begin to focus more on the heart. He says the heart gives us universal characteristics, and the brain gives us individual characteristics. Okay? For this reason, the heart holds the key to bonding with others, like we said in the beginning. Because the heart gives us universal characteristics and is the key to bonding, if we want to live in a world filled with peace and love, we need to listen and think more with our hearts instead of only with our brains. And I love that Master Samael says in some of his books, we need to learn how to think with the heart and feel with the brain, right? Through the hidden power of the heart, we can achieve universal understanding. Therefore, living in a world filled with peace and love is possible, okay? And this is why we're all here. This is what inspires me to continue to open my doors to all of you so that we can begin to tap into the heart and begin to sort of create that peace and that love that we want to see in the world, right? Taking on from the words of Gandhi, that we want to be you got to be the change that you want to see in the world, right? And the change begins with ourselves. So how do we unlock those powers? Okay, and this is Samael sort of gave us a clue here when he says the sense of aesthetics, mysticism, ecstasy, superior music is necessary in order to cultivate the emotional center. Or in other words, okay, that all of these things, the sense of aesthetics, and I'm going to talk about objective art or sacred art, okay? Sacred art has the purpose of stimulating the superior emotional centers. It has the purpose of stimulating the heart, right? And this is why we surround ourselves with all of these beautiful statues and paintings from, all of the various different traditions that of painters and artists that saw their internal divinity and then they showed us how they look, right? So that we can be inspired. Okay. So we activate the powers of the heart, okay, through meditation, through the practice of mindfulness, prayers, mantras, sacred music, and I recommend kirtan music, some classical masterpieces, chants like Gregorian chants, chants of spiritual type, okay? Sacred art, sacred literature, okay? And like I said before, there are different types of art. There are two types of art that we talk about in Gnosticism, some that we call objective art and subjective art, okay? Objective art is the art that represents the transcendental beauty of life, okay? It's art that tries to manifest or represent those divine ideas, those divine principles, okay? And then there is subjective art, which is the result of the conditioned consciousness. It is the result of, we can say, expressions of a consciousness that is trapped within materiality, okay? Trapped within just the senses, okay? And is not connected with the spiritual nature. So, we have, for example, movies like those very gory movies and, like Saw and all those movies. There's nothing, that's all, we could say subjective art, right? That's art that stimulates not the heart, not the superior emotions, but stimulates more of your lower instinctive and inferior nature, right? And I believe that most of the art, most of the system that most of our culture is constantly bombarding us, right, with things that make us sort of go into our inferior nature, right? And this is why, again, going back and reading the sacred scriptures, no matter from what religion, it always stimulates a higher sense of being, okay? Okay, so So that's it for now. That's the last slide. And this is, again, this is why the sort of the main practice in every spiritual tradition focus sort of center around these 3 or 4 right here, right? Meditation, which is when we learn to meditate, we learn to be mindful, okay, and vice versa. Okay, so these two sort of go together, and prayer and mantras, which stimulate the heart, right? When we pray, when we meditate, meditation has really nothing to do with the mind. Meditation is about connecting with the heart. And once you connect with the heart, then the heart begins to tell the mind what to do. And usually what it tells the mind is, it tells the mind to become serene, to become receptive, right? So when we begin to go into the heart, the mind becomes receptive, sort of like we begin to listen, right? To see, okay, the heart has some knowledge and I want to listen to it, okay? And that's the purpose of, that will be the purpose of this entire course as we go through all of the various topics that we will study. And as we go through the various meditation practices, they're all aimed at teaching us how to open our hearts, how to develop that those superior emotions so that our mind can really begin to listen to our heart and connect with our being. Okay. The next phase of the program, we're actually going to start talking about the mind. Okay, like I said, I wanted to talk about the heart first because I want you guys to sort of, I want to have this foundation, right? That the mind should follow the heart. Okay, and so in the next class, we're going to talk about the 3 aspects of the mind, and we're going to get deeper into how the mind works and how useful the mind could be to us, right? Because in the current state, it's not as useful. We're not using the mind to its full potential in the same way that we're not really using the heart and the emotional center to its full potential. Okay? All right. Any questions, comments? You're all free to speak. All right. All right, well, we'll do a meditation, and then if something comes up, then we can discuss it a little more, all right? Cool, all right.